welcome to this video for basic sentential logic, informal fallacies, and cognitive biases. This video corresponds to material in sections 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3. And I'm going to be just doing a few examples of proofs that use the first three replacement rules: double negation, commutation, and conditional exchange. So here's a proof. We have three premises, and the conclusion is not are. I'm looking at this, and the only place are as a letter shows up is here. And now that we have the rule double negation, I know that if I can get are, I can turn it into not are in one step. So now I'm thinking, how can I get are? Well, if I had this statement, this antecedent, I could get are by modus ponens, then double negate it, and I'm there. How can I get this antecedent? Well, it's less than clear. This conjunction E and D, I have D and E here, so I can always swap the order of these. That's part of this. I'd have to somehow get this off of this disjunct out of this disjunction. But I can at least see some of the pieces in play now. So the first thing I'm going to do, and you'll see why in a minute, is I'm going to do conditional exchange on line 1. So this is a disjunction. I can turn a disjunction into a conjunction. Second component stays the same. I have to negate the first component. So C becomes not C. Now, what I'm going to do is start a conditional proof. Now, I could have started the conditional proof on line 4 and then done CE on line 1. That would have been fine. But the conditional I want is if A, then E and D, or D and E. It doesn't matter, because if I get D and E, I can always swap it. If I can get if A, then E and D, I can double negate the A, then I have this antecedent. So I've assumed A. How can I get E and D or D and E, either one? Well, you're going to see it's pretty easy. I have A now, so I can get not C. With not C, I can get D and E. So I can get not C by modus ponens on 2 and 5. Now that I have not C, I can get D and E by modus ponens on 6 and 4. Of course, I didn't have to do line 4 at all, as a matter of fact, because at this point, if I just had not C, I could have gotten D and E by disjunctive syllogism. I have the negation of the first disjunct, derive the second disjunct. This is another illustration of how there's an infinite number of ways to correctly do any proof. In any case, I assumed A and derived D and E, so I get the conditional if A, then D and E. And why this conditional? Well, because I know that if I have this conditional, I can turn it into this conditional here, this antecedent. I have to double negate the A to turn it into not A. I have to swap the D and E to make it E and D. But once I do these two things, I'll have this antecedent. I can get R by modus ponens. So first I'm just going to double negate the A. Then I'm going to swap D and E, commutation on line 9. Now I have, this is the antecedent of line 3, so I can get R by modus ponens. I'm not done yet, of course, because the conclusion I want is not R, but with the rule double negation, I can add or subtract tildes as long as I do it in pairs, and so I'll just add a pair of tildes. Okay, let's do another proof. This is another one. A lot of ways you could do this proof. I'm going to do one that uses some of the inference, the replacement rules that we've just been introduced. But you could do this in a lot of ways, and you don't even really need to do, I think you might need double negation, but here's one way you could do it. I'm going to do conditional exchange on line 1. Disjunction becomes a conditional. I negate the first component, so A becomes not A. I'm going to commute line 2, so C or D becomes D or C, and then turn that into a conditional. Wedge becomes horseshoe, negate the first component. D becomes not D. Now, at this point, I can do, and I could have started with this actually, but I didn't. Again, there's an infinite number of ways to do it correctly. I'm going to do a conditional proof because what I'm trying to derive is a conditional. So I'm going to assume not A, try to get not C. And you can see it's going to be pretty easy. Once I've got not A, I can get B. With B, then I can, on modus ponens, get not D. With not D, I can get C, and then just double negate the C. So I'm going to assume not A, because I want to end up with if not A, then C, or if not A, then not C, either one of those. If I end up with if not A, then C, I'll just do double negation on the consequent to turn it into not C. So I'm going to assume not A, and now my goal is just to get C or not C, either one. Super easy, because now that I have not A, I can get B by modus ponens. With B, I can get not D by modus ponens. And with not D, I can get C by modus ponens. Now at this point, here's two different things I could do. I could, on line 12, turn C into not C, and then when I close my conditional proof, I would just immediately have if A, then not C, and I'd be done. Or I could first close the conditional proof, which is what I'm going to do. I get if not A, then C by line 7 through 11 conditional proof, and now do the double negation on C to get if not A, then not C. You probably can tell that I didn't really have to do some of these. I could have, instead of doing modus ponens here on conditionals, I could have just left these as disjunctions and used disjunctive syllogism instead. That would have been fine also. Let's do one more proof. This is one that's similar to some examples I did in the prior video. Remember in the last video, the first one for chapter 4, I did a couple of examples that essentially involved using conditional exchange and commutation to swap the order of the antecedent and consequent in some conditionals. And that's essentially what's going on here. Premise 1, and here's the conclusion. And if you look at this, let's start here. So let's look at this antecedent. If G, then not H. If we swap the order of these and negate both of them, we would get if H, then not G. So this component here is just the swap of this conditional here. We've changed the order of antecedent and consequent and negated both of them. And we know how to do that. We've seen examples of these 3 steps that will let you swap the order of these. Also, notice if not J, then K is a conditional where we've swapped the order and negated antecedent and consequent for this one. If not J, then K, and this is if not K, the negation of that, then J, the negation of that. So this component here also is a conditional that's the opposite order of this one, but with both components negated. And the entire statement is as well. So this whole thing is a conditional, this whole thing is a conditional, and we've moved this to the end and negated it, and we've moved this to the beginning and negated it. In this case, we negated it by subtracting the tilde. So I'm going to, in this case, do that same 3-step sequence, only I'm going to do it 3 times. I'm going to do it once to work on this component, once to work on this component, and again to work on the entire statement. So first, I'm going to just work on this antecedent. So I'm doing conditional exchange. All of this stuff is staying the same. Everything here, the consequent and this horseshoe, are staying the same. I'm only working on this part. This conditional becomes a disjunction. I negate the first component. Second component stays the same. That's conditional exchange. Now I'm going to swap the order. Not H goes here, not G goes there. Then I'm going to do conditional exchange again. Disjunction becomes a conditional, negate the first element. Not H becomes H. Second component stays the same. The rest of the line stays the same. So notice all of this stuff has stayed exactly the same through all of these steps because I was only working on this part. Now I'm going to work just on this part, and so everything else is going to stay the same. This component, this, and even this tilde, because I'm only working on the stuff that's in here that's negated, this conditional. So the first thing I'm going to do is CE on line 4. Horseshoe becomes a wedge. First component gets negated. Not J becomes J. Second component stays the same. Now I'm going to swap the order of those two, K or J. Again, notice everything else is staying the same. And now conditional exchange again. Wedge becomes horseshoe, second component stays the same, first component gets negated. K becomes not K. Now I'm going to do the same 3 steps only on the entire statement. I'm going to swap the order of this antecedent and this consequent. So this will become the consequent, this will become the antecedent, both of them will get negated. And you can see that once I've done that, this is what I'll have. So first up, conditional exchange. Horseshoe becomes a wedge. Second component stays the same. First component gets negated. So I put a tilde in front of this conditional, if H, then not G. Okay. Next, I'm going to swap the order. So this disjunct is going to go on the right. This disjunct is going to go on the left. Now I'm going to do conditional exchange again. I'm going to turn this disjunction into a conditional. And I have to negate the first component when I do that. So wedge becomes a horseshoe, and I negate the first component by removing one tilde this time. And you can see that now I'm finished because I have antecedent if not K then J, then consequent negation of if H then not G. Okay, that's it for these videos. Study hard and actually start doing a lot of proofs now. So even though we're only partway into the chapter, don't wait till we're done. There's a lot of exercises online, and you can start getting used to these 3 replacement rules. Now,